In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the balance changes coming in June. I'm excited because I actually didn't think we were going to be getting balance changes this month because we got balance changes in May, and normally they do balances every 2 months, but we're getting them 2 months in a row. And I think the main reason why is because we're getting a big update in June, so they probably decided to add in balance changes alongside with it. Now, one important thing to note is these are not the final balance changes. Most of them will stay, but the balance team is going to take the feedback from the community, so what you guys are saying on social media platforms such as Twitter, and decide on a finalized version. So be sure to let them know what you think of these balances if there's any you want them to change. Starting off, we got the Giant. He is getting a 25% range nerf, which is pretty significant. It's going from 1.60 tiles to 1.20. So I feel like the Giant has been very strong recently, but 25% might be a little bit too much, so I'm kind of torn on this one. So essentially, they're kind of removing one of his buffs he recently got, because a range buff in the past year he ended up getting, but he also got a health buff, so they essentially took one of his buffs away. Next up is the Little Prince, and he's getting an absolutely massive nerf. He definitely deserves a nerf, but this may be a little bit too far. His charge damage is being reduced by 75%. Now, it says hit points here. I think they meant to say damage. They just made a typo. 399 damage all the way to 99. And then the first hit time is being increased by 150%, going from 0.200 seconds all the way to 0.500. This may, though, be the big nerf he needs, because he's been getting a lot of little nerfs over and over again that haven't really been impacting him very much, and this might finally make it so he isn't the best champion in the game anymore. The Evolved Knight is getting another well-deserved nerf, because even after the last one, he has remained to be the best evolution in the game. So he is getting a 9% hit points multiplier nerf. It's going from 1.10 to 1. So now he doesn't have any hit point bonus, but he still has that shield effect, which means he likely is going to remain quite good still. The Evolved Tesla, just like the Little Prince, is getting a massive nerf to it because there's two parts of it that are getting a nerf, and it is one of the strongest evolutions in the game, so maybe it is needed. The pulse damage is getting nerfed by 23%, going from 192 all the way to 148. And then the pulse stun is being cut in half. It's going from 1 second to half a second. So overall, I'm a fan of this change. It's a pretty harsh nerf, but they could always give it a tiny bit of a buff after if they took it too far. Now we're on to some of the buffs. The Ramrider is getting a charge distance buff of 50%. So normally it takes 3 tiles in order for her to charge. Now it's only going to take 1.5. This is a really good change in my opinion, because for the last year or two, the Ramrider has by far been one of the worst win conditions in the game, especially because of all the evolutions in the game, and this is definitely going to help her out quite a lot, and she might finally be viable again in competitive and at the top of ladder. The Prince is getting the same buff as the Ramrider. His charge distance is being cut in half, going from 3 tiles to 1.5. And just like the Ramrider, I'm alright with this change, because the Prince, kind of like the Ramrider, has been pretty weak recently, so they decided to give them both the same buff to help them out quite a bit. The Spear Goblins are getting a massive buff. They are pretty weak right now, but this is a pretty big one, because their first hit time is being reduced by 40%, which means it's going from 0.500 seconds all the way to 0.300. So I definitely think we are going to be seeing these again inside of Beatty decks and Mortar decks. The Dark Goblin is getting a buff too, and kind of like the Spear Goblins, I haven't been seeing a lot of Dark Goblin recently, so I think this one's pretty deserved. He's getting an 8% damage buff, which means it's going from 131 damage to 142, which is certainly going to change a decent amount of interactions. And the last Goblin card they're going to be buffing is the Goblin Cage, which I think is a pretty good buff, because Goblin Cage, I do think, is one of the worst buildings in the game at the moment. There's pretty much no reason to play it at this point in this meta. The Cage hit points is being buffed by 5%, so it's going from 742 to 780. I don't know how significant this buff is going to be. It's going to change probably a few interactions depending on the situation, but if I had to predict, it still might be pretty weak. Since release, the Void spell has been pretty strong, so they already decided to give it a rework. Personally, I think this rework is a nerf if I had to guess, but as always with reworks, it's it's hard to predict for sure, but the first hit time is being increased by 150%, which means it's going from 0.400 seconds all the way to 1 second. But the hit speed is being increased, going from 0.667 hits per second to 0.769. Now, the reason I think this is overall a nerf is because the first hit time being increased by that much means it's easier for your opponent to block the void. Normally, that first strike comes down almost instantly, and they have little time to react and protect the unit that you're voiding. But now they have way more time, so they're likely going to be able to stop all the strikes a lot easier, which is why I definitely think this rework is probably a nerf to the card. Now, for the Dagger Duchess, they actually provided 2 nerf options, and they're going to see what the community says, and based on your guys' feedback, they're going to see if people prefer option 1 or option 2. Now, this first option, it looks like a rework, but it is a nerf overall, even though it might be a little confusing. Her damage is getting reduced by 27%, and that is a massive, massive nerf to her damage, which changes so many interactions. It's going from 153 to 112. Now, it gets confusing because you see the hit speed increased by 32%, so you might be thinking, doesn't this look like a buff to her? Now, okay, in some situations it could be, but majority of the time it's definitely a nerf to her because it's a massive nerf to her damage, and because she already has a pretty fast hit speed. And an important thing to remember, of course, when she's out of ammo, you know, she has to reload anyway. So her hit speed being increased means she's going to fire faster, but that also means she's going to run out of ammo faster. So in that sense, it doesn't really make a difference oftentimes just because she shoots quicker. So that's why overall the damage getting nerfed makes this a nerf, even though it's considered a rework. Now, the second option, though, on the other hand, is a massive direct nerf to her, and I have a feeling the community is probably going to prefer this one just because they have had enough of all the Dagger Duchess everywhere recently. Her usage rate is literally like 100% on the top of ladder. I mean, I really think that says enough. So her dagger stored getting reduced by 25%, going from 8 all the way to 6. Now, this is a massive, massive nerf to her, but I think this might be what is necessary in order to tone her down and make her at the level of the Princess Tower again. And even if she's slightly worse than the Princess Tower, if she ends up getting one of these 2 nerfs, I think that that is okay too, because I think many people would prefer if the Princess Tower is the one that is strongest slightly, or at least at the same level as the others. To close out the video, I just wanted to show you guys this just to really put into perspective why the Dagger Duchess needs a massive nerf. If you look at the top 10 last season, all finishers in the top 10 on ladder were using the Dagger Duchess. That is just wild. This is way more than the Cannoneer. For the Cannoneer, it was 6 or 7 out of the top 10. Dagger Duchess, everyone in the top 10 using her. I think this proves it why she's getting a massive nerf. I just wanted to show this because I saw there were a lot of casual players or mid-ladder players who thought the Dagger Duchess for some reason wasn't that good. I was for some reason seeing a decent amount of people saying that, but this is kind of all you need to see to realize why she is absurd, and she has just changed the meta so much, which is why I'm excited to see her get a nerf. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. You can use creator code BOSS to support me in any Supercell game, and also let me know in the comments below, how do you guys feel about these balance changes that are coming up?